Jackie? Is Renee coming?
She is supposed to be, and bringing Michelle also.
Just checking. I'm going to be looking for my purple pen back at the end of the day. Somebody's going to try and make off with that,
And they probably will.
you know.
I kind of like the way they wrote. Oh.
I'm thinking this will last about an hour, give or take, depending on questions. We're going to talk about 2 different policies, both of which have recently been revised and new to extension. I want to focus a little more on the vehicle use policy, and that is how this group was selected to be invited, because not everyone has a state vehicle, doesn't apply to everyone. But also, I want to introduce the travel policy as well. There will be more travel training later. Jackie and her crew and Renee are working on that. This will probably be the only time that we have a live vehicle use training. So, first of all, I want to give you just a little bit of background. We are trying more and more to coordinate our policies with those of AES. It's been a problem for a long time that half of the Division of Ag was on one system, one set of policies. Is this not working? Sorry. Is it just not loud enough? Can y'all not hear me? Tom? Yeah, it's on. It's on. Okay, let me try this. That'll work better. Is this any better? Okay. Okay, anyway, we're trying to coordinate our policies more with the other arm of the division. So as we develop new policies, more and more they're going to be division policies and not just CES policies. And that is the case with these 2 things. We're trying to kind of all get on the same page. So the first one we're going to talk about is the division vehicle use policy that did go into effect April 1 of this year. The vehicle use policy says that we shall follow state regs for use of state-owned vehicles. And it has links to a couple of things that are partly the basis for our policy. There was an executive directive, and the governor has issued a pronouncement or 2 that deals with that, so there's links for that there. Then, to get to the vehicle use policy, you'll need to go to the division website here, click on Policy and Management Guidelines, and that will bring up this page. Then you'll need to scroll down, because these are in numerical order, and when you get to 5-2, that is the vehicle use policy. What you have here, you have, first of all, a link to vehicle safety driving tips. We're not going to talk about that today. They're very basic. This is something the state puts out, and the state requires us to communicate to our drivers. And the next thing is an authorization to operate, and we are going to take a look at it for just a minute. And the third thing here are the forms. Right now there are 2 tabs on that file, and we're going to talk about both of those forms. And we're going to be adding a 3rd tab, and we'll talk about the form that's going to go on that tab. The policy itself, the link is just right up there. If you click on that, you get this policy. Division vehicles should be used for official business purposes only. That's not new. All occupants in the vehicles should be traveling in conjunction with official business for the division. That means you're not supposed to be transporting friends and family members in a state vehicle. Everybody in the car should be on official business for the division. Drivers must be at least 18. I don't think that lets anybody in here out. We're probably good with that. Valid driver's license. And no form of tobacco is permitted. So not just cigarettes, but the stuff that comes in that round can or anything else, not permitted. Now, the authorization to operate, most of you have seen this form. It's part of our hiring packet. And the new form is not much different at all, but we do require now a signature at the bottom. However, we are not going to make everybody who's currently a driver go back and redo this form. We'll implement this prospectively. Okay. Vehicle logs. We recommend, well, you have to keep a vehicle log, and we're going to talk about what all has to be on that, but we recommend the use of a binder. Just a small, maybe half-inch binder like this, and I've got some slides with this, to keep track of everything that you're going to need at the end of the month when you do your reports. You're going to have to keep the log and receipts. We also recommend that you keep some other things in this binder, and we're going to help you with that. We're going to try to compile in one place some things we think will be good in here, like what do you do if the car breaks down? What do you do if you're in an accident? Things like that. This binder that we recommend, I also recommend that somewhere on the front of that you list your department and a phone number or some kind of contact information. So if this falls out of a vehicle or somehow gets misplaced, people will know where to return it. We recommend that you keep a pencil pouch, just like the one you had in school, fits in a 3-ring binder, so that you can put your receipts in there and zip them up and not have to worry about them falling out. Now, it's not mandated, but you got to have some way to keep up with your receipts, and it's just a recommendation. And in this binder also, of course, you will have your travel logs. We recommend that you put several pages worth of the blank logs because they're all the same, they don't expire, they don't change month to month, and that way if one happens to get filled up during the month, there will be another one there ready for use. All right, so what has to be on that log? Here's a list of things, and we're going to look at an actual sample of the log, but here's the list of things that need to be on it. Date of use, name of driver, beginning and ending odometer, destination and purpose, amounts of gas or repairs, and the fund and org to charge. We have decided, after numerous questions, that if a vehicle is used multiple times in the same vicinity in one day, you can make one entry for that day. So in other words, I had the question recently, somebody was going to go to Fort Smith, and while they were in Fort Smith, they had 2 or 3 places they had to visit. Did they have to put the beginning and ending odometer every time they got in the car and drove 3 miles to the next place? No. They can do that all in one entry and say, went to Fort Smith, visited this office and this place for this purpose. But now if you go from Fort Smith on to Fayetteville, you should list that separately. Does that make sense? So here is a sample of the log, the columns, and the information requested. And I filled a couple of things in for you. First of all, on the VIN, you only need the last 4. You don't have to try to list that big old long number. The last 4 is sufficient, as long as you have, this other information. Date, name, beginning, ending, odometer is self-explanatory. Miles driven, if you want, and you are the driver, you can wait and let your assistant calculate that at the end of the month. If you just log the beginning and the ending, the rest can get filled in monthly. If you bought gas or had a repair expense, you have to keep the receipt, log the amount here, and the form says provide receipt to accounting. Now this form is the form that's used for the whole division. So we can't tweak it just to fit extension, okay? If we could, we would have put provide receipts to physical plant. So I just noted for you here on this slide that the receipts actually go to Cindy at the end of the month. Yes?
Can that column be treated the same way the miles driven column can be, so that information is entered
Yes.
Support staff at the end of
As long as you keep up with the receipts, certainly, your support staff can go through and record that. I just want to be sure you knew the receipts don't actually go to financial services here. They still go to Cindy. That's the way we've always done it. We're really not changing much in terms of how we've operated before. Just a little difference, maybe with some forms. Now, destination and purpose. It's not sufficient to say, I went to Fayetteville on division business. You know, what does that mean? Why did you really go to Fayetteville? And just to attend a meeting is not sufficient. What meeting did you go to? You know, and does that meeting make sense for your job? If it doesn't, you might want to put another little explanation of why you happen to go to that meeting when it's not normally, you know, in your line of work. So, destination, where you went, and why you went there. Okay? And then this last column is what fund and org you want to charge it to. We're not looking for a dollar amount at this point, just what fund and org for that trip. So for each trip that you took, what fund and org is it charged to? Now, if everything on the sheet is charged to the same fund and org, you know, you can list it once and just do the ditto marks all the way down, or a line all the way down, or something. Some people, it's the same fund and org, but most people end up wanting to split some of those between different funds. Are we okay with this? Any questions on this part? Where does this reside, this form? In the vehicle, preferably in a binder so you can keep up with it, but in the vehicle, except at the end of the month when you bring it in to tally everything up and get ready to prepare the monthly report. Yes?
So this needs to line up, the fund and org and everything needs to line up with their in-state travel. If they, you know what I'm saying, they're, you know, they're monthly and they're gonna put everything in there and their fund and their org, and then, you know, they also have an in-state travel if they have expenses. So is that gonna, it needs to coincide with.
Yeah, I wouldn't think you would want to put, to charge the mileage to one fund and org and any miscellaneous expenses to another. So I would think those should match.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, gas cards. We use the Voyager gas cards. Those are the ones that are approved and basically acquired by the state on state contract. They are assigned to vehicles now, not to people. So there will be one gas card for each state vehicle. And then the drivers should have individual identification numbers. If a qualified driver doesn't have a PIN because they're not eligible, not because they just didn't bother to apply and get one, but because they're not eligible, and mainly what we're talking about here are students. And I think this is mainly an AES thing than a CES thing, but some of you may have students working for you. Part-timers, we generally don't issue PINs to, but if you need them to take your truck and go get gas, they can do that with your approval. You can give them your card and your PIN. But then when they buy that gas, they need to sign the receipt, noting that they are the ones who purchased the gas and not you. Okay? So we need a record of who actually purchased the gas, and unless somebody else signs that ticket, we assume that you purchased it. Okay? All right, the monthly reports. The monthly report that is going to need to be completed now looks a little different than the one that you have been completing, but it has the same information. So don't let the format scare you. It's the same information. This report is going to summarize the information on those travel logs, and it needs to be completed, and we're going to look at it here in a minute, and submitted to Cindy along with the travel logs and any receipts for gas or repairs by when? 5th working day of the month following the month to which the logs and receipts applied. Now, that's not happening real well currently. We need to do a better job of getting those in by the 5th of the month. Yes? Paula, did you have a question? Okay. And as part of a response to a travel audit that we had not too long ago, both myself and Elizabeth at the experiment station or our designees will now periodically draw a sample of those monthly reports and travel logs, and we'll compare and make sure that the monthly report matches the travel logs and that the monthly report matches what has been entered into the state's system. The state has an online reporting system. Cindy does that entering. So the auditors want to know that what gets reported to the state is really what those logs are showing happened. And the intermediate step is the monthly report. So I'm going to be matching up all three of those. Okay? And if they don't match, I'll be making calls and trying to get it straightened out. Okay, here's a picture of the individual state vehicle report, and we're going to break it down in a minute and blow it up, so don't worry if you can't read all the lines. I just wanted you to see what it looks like as a whole. Couple of things I want to comment on. This says individual state vehicle report. Individual means individual vehicle, not individual driver. So we need a report per vehicle, okay? Not a report per driver. Also, if you notice, everything at the top here is repeated at the bottom. That's just so there could be 6 months each across, and we could get it all in one page. So it's not as bad as it looks. It looks kind of busy there. Also, I'll mention that this report sometimes is referred to as an MV2A. It is the report that used to have to be turned into the state before the state got its online system. It's the state that it's the form that AES is used to using. And so that's why we adopted this form. It's the same information that we had before, just a little different format. Okay, what I'm doing here in this slide is I've taken the header of that form and blown it up for you and annotated it a little bit. We need you to complete everything in this column, okay, for the period, year and make of car, license number. Now, serial number, parentheses, VIN, again, the last 4 would be fine. Location, meaning department. Where does this vehicle, where is it accounted for? The second column of information that is asked for, you don't have to fill out any of that. Just ignore that middle column. This is for if you're actually adding a new vehicle to the fleet or taking a vehicle off, and none of you should be doing that. The last column, all we need is prepared by. Okay. Again, you can see agency name and agency code. That's old language from it being a statewide form that was used. So all we need there is prepared by. Okay? Now, here's a blow up of the body of that form. And line by line, what should happen with it. Okay? Nature of use, you can leave blank because all we put is pool. We have a standard answer that goes into the state's reporting system, so you don't need to get creative on nature of use. Just leave it blank. Maintenance and repair cost, you're going to need to sum all the receipts, and that can be done right there in this form by just adding up the receipts. And what we plan to do is, for those of you who actually prepare the forms, Jackie and Yolanda are going to have another little training session on how to do this. But if you're familiar with Excel, all you have to do is hit the equal sign, start putting in your numbers with a plus sign between them. If one receipt says that you had a repair cost of $10, you put equals 10, and another one has $5, and you put plus 5, plus this, plus however many you got, and then you hit enter, and it adds them up and displays the total. So it can all be done right there on that sheet. Insurance cost, you need to leave that blank. We will enter that for the institution. We will calculate an average based on our premiums and everything. That's information that you are not privy to, so don't worry about that. Fuel costs, the same way as the maintenance and repair costs. You can just enter them equal, and then number plus, number plus, number plus, however many you got, hit enter, boom, there's your total. Okay? All right, and then this E, total cost, B plus C plus D, this will automatically calculate. We'll have a formula in that cell. Yolanda is updating those forms. We discovered the ones on the website did not have the formulas in them, so she's updating that, and we'll get those back out there shortly. And this will auto-calculate. All right, ending mileage. You should enter this from the last entry in the log. That last entry in the log should be the ending mileage for the month, right? And the ending mileage for that month should become what? The beginning mileage of the next month. These monthly reports need to tie to the logs. So, ending mileage, enter from last entry in the log compared to next month's report. That should become next month's beginning figure. The beginning mileage, enter from the first entry in the log and compare to last month's report, because the ending mileage from last month should be the beginning mileage of this month. But I encourage you to look at the log, not just last month's monthly report, because you need to make sure they're in sync. Total mileage for the month, this will auto-calculate as well. So you enter this one and this one's going to populate. That cell will populate. Gallons of fuel, you'll need to sum all the receipts just like you did for the couple of things up there. This plus this plus this plus this. The miles per gallon will then be automatically calculated. Not so bad, huh? Any questions on this?
If you have a trip that goes across 2 months, like you travel on the last day of the
Ooh.
month and the first day of the next month completes that travel period, what happens to your purpose of trip and your log in the beginning?
Okay, that's a good question, and one I haven't heard before. But you must have stopped and slept somewhere that night, or
Possibly, yeah.
so I'm thinking you need to have an ending odometer for that month, because you probably weren't traveling at midnight, and
Right.
even if you stopped en route,
So that would just be en route to.
yeah, I think I would just put the ending odometer and just put, en route to, stop en route to wherever. And you're going to have probably a hotel bill from that night showing where you were and everything. So, yeah, because we're going to have an ending odometer for that month, and we're going to have a beginning for the next month. And then start a new page. Mm-hmm. That's a good question, though, because that may very well happen. Yeah. Been there, done that, huh? Okay? Okay, now we have a new form. And this new form is not division-wide. It's just an extension form, and it's something that we need to be able to summarize what costs are going to go to what fund and org so that financial services can get those chargebacks in Banner properly. The form should be completed and submitted to Yolanda and Kristen by the same day that you send everything else to Cindy. You'll need to email it to them, and by the way, that information, who to send it to, is actually on the form. So if you forget, it's on the form. We want you to submit it even if only one fund and org combo is used. That way we know it didn't just get, lost in the shuffle or something. Go ahead and submit it even if you're not breaking it out into multiple funds and orgs. And I encourage you, after a reasonable amount of time, because Yolanda doesn't do these every day when they come in, she waits and batches them and enters them before we close for the month. So towards the end of the month, following the month that you submitted that for, please go in and check and make sure that those charges hit the proper fund and org so that, if there's a keying entry or something, you can catch it quickly and let Yolanda know, and we can get that corrected. Okay. All right, here is a picture of the new form. It will be the third tab on that form link from the policy, probably in another week maybe or so, before the end of the month, before you'll need it. And it'll have a miscellaneous form number. We don't know what that is yet. Hasn't been assigned. And this gives you the option of distributing your charges either by number of miles or by percentage. So some of you like to just say, I'm half ag and I'm half 4-H and I split everything I do or whatever. You can do that by percent. Or if you do it trip by trip, it's the place to summarize for that fund and org how many miles, what's the rate, and then this will auto-populate or auto-calculate. Okay? And this is where it says what to do. Do it monthly by the 5th. Send it to Yolanda and Kristen. And here are the mileage rates, depending on your type of vehicle. And if the mileage rates change, we will go in and change these rates on that form. So you won't have to look anything up or call and find out what the rate is. Okay?
Is that going to be located in the templates also?
Yes, it will. Yes. Okay, other questions? No? If you have questions later, if it's a policy type question, please call either myself or Jackie. If it's a what to do with the forms kind of question, then please contact Yolanda or Jackie. Okay? And then they can route you around or confer with Cindy or whatever they need to do. That's it? Yes. Okay.
Is this going to be when we can retrieve this and have it?
Yes, it's going to be posted on Learn. And if you want just a copy of the slides, email my new part-time assistant, Diane Vaughn. I'll give them to her, and she could just email you a set of the slides too. Noah, we okay? Got that wrinkle there. Okay. She's got furrowed brow. Okay, well that went so well. Let's tackle travel. Okay, now, this is not meant to be an in-depth training on travel. It's just kind of an introduction as to kind of the nature and the background and what it's going to kind of look like now, okay? First of all, this is division travel policy, PMGS 12-1, and there's the link. Where we started with this was AES uses UAF, or University of Arkansas Fayetteville's travel policies. They use all their policies. They also use their administrative services to process their travel, their payroll, their payables, and everything. So it's hard for them to deviate from what UAF does because they're all on the same system. So when we decided that AES and CES was going to try to get on the same page, we were looking at very different systems. Our travel policies looked very different than Fayetteville's, but we were going to try to go with Fayetteville's. What we found as we started going through those is there are a number of things in the Fayetteville policy that division administration just wasn't comfortable with. And so the approach we took was, the general rule is we're going to follow Fayetteville except as noted in the division policy, and we delineate several exceptions to the Fayetteville policy. Again, if you go to the division webpage, you click on Policy and Management Guidelines, and then you're going to have to scroll all the way to the bottom because this is new. This isn't just a revision to an old division policy, so this has a new number based on the year that it was implemented or adopted. So it is Policy 12-1 at the bottom of the list. If you click on that link, you get this. Now, it's not an eye exam. You don't have to read that from the back of the room. I just wanted you to see what it looks like. And there's a page or two behind it, but this is what we'll pull up. Okay. Now we're going to kind of blow this up a little bit. The first part is a general statement of policy that basically says we're going to adhere to University of Arkansas travel services policies with exceptions noted below. This next paragraph is just a bunch of yah-yah about AES uses Basis and we use Banner, and it really doesn't have much to do with policy, so don't worry about that. This last paragraph on this page, though, if you have an ADC fund, this might affect you. The new policy is that ADC will no longer process travel reimbursement requests. Travel reimbursement requests must be routed through either Basis or Banner, through either AES or CES, and ADC will not be processing travel claims. And the reason for that is primarily to prevent the possibility of duplicating travel expenses. This again was an auditor issue that said, there's nothing to prevent somebody from submitting a travel claim to ADC and submitting one to CES or AES. And for a while, Patty and Elizabeth and I were having to check with each other on every single travel claim. That just doesn't work. So administration decided no more through ADC. They got to go through Basis or Banner. Okay. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't transfer funds from ADC to cover those expenses. So if you're used to having your travel for a particular program paid for out of ADC, what you need to do is charge that to a reimbursable account, a $17,000 account. And if you don't have one, call Yolanda and she'll get you one. And then we'll move money. We'll basically bill ADC. You'll do a payment authorization, and they'll transfer the funds to cover your charges. Okay? So that doesn't mean you can't use ADC funds. It just means the processing has to go through us. Yolanda? Sure.
If you have multiple ADC accounts, we will only give you one fund, and you will have to keep up with the account numbers, how much you're spending out of each, because we're running low on fund numbers and we're trying to keep all these ADC funds together. So for each PI or department head who has multiple ADC accounts, you will only get one fund number.
Okay, I'm going to repeat that just since you didn't have the mic. In case you didn't hear, Yolanda says if you have multiple ADC accounts, you're only going to have one 17,000 reimbursable fund number here at Extension, because we just can't have a separate fund number for every PI and every department head's every account at ADC. So you'll be responsible for keeping up with the balances in your various ADC accounts.
Let me ask Yolanda a question. Ag specialists sometimes pay some of my agents travel, and sometimes they do it through ADC. So when they're doing their travel, they would use that specialist 17,000
Yes.
account.
Yes.
And then it'd be up to that specialist to make sure it got billed back to that ADC.
Yes, because we don't, it's the department's job to fill out the payment authorization form. We
Okay.
don't fill that out.
So the specialist would just give that agent that 17,000 account number.
Whatever
That's
17,000, they'll
awesome.
say, put that on your travel form, and then we will bill the department, and then they will fill out the form
Okay.
to get reimbursed.
Now, I will add one other thing that we didn't know for a long time, but if you know that you're going to have a lot of expenses for a particular program, let's say, that you're going to want reimbursed from ADC, we can preload your 17,000 fund with some money so that you don't have to do payment authorizations every time you have an expense. And then you can just work off that balance. It's almost kind of like a line of credit in that fund. So we can do things like that in some circumstances. Other questions? Okay. More of the general policy. This first part, again, just recognizes the differences between our two systems and provides the links for the travel policies. Now, AES will link straight to the UAF travel policy. We couldn't do that because that policy refers to basis throughout, uses terms that are unique to Fayetteville campus. They talk about desks and different things. So the gist of the policy is the same, but we had to go in and scrub it for any reference to basis and anything particular to UAF, and insert references to Banner and to our processes and terms, okay? So that's why there's two different links, but the meat of the policy is the same. Now, this is where we get into the exceptions. This is where the exceptions to the Fayetteville policy are listed. Policies and procedures specific to the division that may differ or not be addressed in the UAF policies are, number one, no new traveler T cards are allowed as of 1/1/12. We didn't have them. That's a Fayetteville thing. Doesn't apply to you. The second one just recognizes that we have our own separate vehicle use policy, what we just talked about a few minutes ago. The third one says that we will not reimburse meals for one-day travel where there is not an overnight stay. Well, guess what? We never did anyway. Extension never did. So that doesn't bother us. Not the same on the AES side. That was a big shift for them. Number 4. We realized as we were working through this that the way that we calculated what would be allowed if someone chose to drive rather than fly was very different between AES and CES. So we got on the same page and said, how will we calculate the upper limit of what we will reimburse if somebody chooses to drive instead of fly? First thing is lowest cost airfare for a reasonable schedule booked at least 2 weeks in advance. If you wait till the last minute and then check on the price of a flight, it's likely to be a lot higher than it would have been had you checked timely. So what Renee and her shop will do if that comes in is they will look 2 weeks out and see what would it cost if the trip wasn't for another 2 weeks. And so we'll take that amount as the starting point, Then we'll add $8 a day for airport parking. And I usually get some comments that say, well, now wait a minute. I've stayed a lot of places where at the airport the parking was $10 a day. Well, if you actually fly and actually park at the airport and it costs $10, we'll reimburse $10. In this case, you didn't fly, you didn't park at the airport, you drove. So we're just using this as a way to calculate the upper limit of what we will reimburse you for, okay? So we're going to do $8 a day there, round trip mileage from the home office to the nearest airport, unless there's a reason for you to fly out of a different one. Okay. And then $50 for round trip taxi or shuttle to get from the airport to your conference or hotel or wherever it is you're going. We add all that up and we say that's the maximum we will reimburse you for if you drive. That make sense? Okay. Then it came up, we had a question, well, what if there's 2 or 3 people in the car? Okay, we'll make allowances for that, but it has to be pre-approved by myself or Elizabeth so that we can look at the situation and help determine what would be a reasonable upper limit in that case. And by 2 or 3 people, we mean 2 or 3 employees, not just your family members. Right? Okay, number 5 deals with the amount of time it takes you if you are driving. A lot of times people want to combine business and pleasure and make a conference trip a family vacation. That's fine. But if you take 3 days to drive to a conference because you're making a vacation out of it, those 3 days aren't all going to be official business time. You're going to have to take some annual leave. So the policy is up to 1 day. That 1 day is not a given, okay? Depending on where you're going, your supervisor may say you only need a half a day. It's a maximum of 1 day going and 1 day coming for official business time, and the rest will need to be annual leave. Then it came up, well, what about international travel? Well, we don't have a lot of that, but yeah, if you're flying internationally, it may take you more than 1 day to get there. We'll make exceptions for that. They should be pre-approved and so forth. Okay? I think that one's fairly intuitive. And then we realized that the Fayetteville policy was in direct conflict with state law on this particular issue, where Fayetteville allows you to add tax on top of the per diem and get reimbursed for it. DFNA says no, so we said no. It's funny the number of times we would have to look and kind of pick whether we were going to follow state law or Fayetteville policy, because a lot of times the two are not the same, and this was one of them. Again, we've never allowed that anyway, so that's not a big deal. Okay, now I've gone back to this part of the policy just to show you what we just went through was everything basically on the first page or so of the policy with all the exceptions. Now we're going to pretend that we clicked on the CES link. Okay, if you click on the CES link, you're going to get this. Travel policy as of 4/1/2012. If you put this in a Word document, it would be 15 pages long. Don't let that scare you. Parts of it we've scratched, basically. And it's replacing all of our other travel policies. So if you looked at all of our other travel policies combined, they would be lengthy as well. We'll still have to have some internal guidelines kind of outside of the official policy, because as you know, what we worry about a lot is what funds and orgs, what kind of money is acceptable to use for what kind of expenses. So, for instance, like we just did for Galaxy, certain funds you could use, certain funds you couldn't. We're still going to have some internal guidelines for that sort of thing. Also, we went through the forms. Renee went through them one by one, and we decided if they needed to be deleted or combined or revised or whatever, and so we've kind of scrubbed those as well. One thing you should note is that now anytime UAF policy changes, our policy will have to change because we're mirroring them, and we'll either have to decide to accept their change or add another exception to on the front of our policy. And one thing I list here, because I keep waiting for this to happen, November 1 of last year, DFNA issued new state travel regs. As part of those regs, the state says that there is now a maximum amount of reimbursement for the first day of travel and the last day of travel. And that maximum amount of reimbursement is 75% of the normal per diem for that location and so forth. So, but we've never done that. Fayetteville has not adopted that yet. I keep asking and waiting, but they haven't. So the issue for AES is, again, they're on the same system and theirs is automated. So until somebody goes in and changes their code in their computer system to cap that, it's going to process it at 100%, it's going to cap it at 100%. So because they haven't implemented it yet, we're going to hold off on implementing it. But surely this is coming. So don't be surprised if we don't get this change down the road not too far. Okay, so here's all the travel policies. Many of those will go away. Now, some of these weren't ever really policies to begin with, like the highway mileage chart. That's not a policy, that's just a tool. If you want to use that chart instead of looking it up on MapQuest or Rand McNally. We're going to try to find a place in Spot to kind of aggregate those kinds of tools in case people are still using them, but they're really not policies anyway. And then here's a list of all the travel templates. And some of those will go away. There's a couple that are deleted. Special county travel authorization that is no longer needed. We don't have corporate sponsored individual T-cards that we give out, so we're going to take that away. Then some things Renee just revised for clarification. The main thing you probably need to know here is that TRAV 207 short form, TRAV 207 long form, and TRAV 212 have all been combined. We realized that the in-state form and the out-of-state form only differed by like one little piece of information. So we're going to have, it's out there now, I believe, one form, and at the top of that form you'll check whether it's in-state or out-of-state. You still can't combine in-state and out-of-state on one form. You'll need to do a separate form if it's in-state from out-of-state and just check the appropriate box at the top. Okay? Do it? Oh, it's a drop down? Okay. Drop down and click on the appropriate type of travel then. All right, this slide, what I want to do with this slide is show you, if you are going through that 15-page document, you will occasionally come to those sections that the division has chosen to deviate from. And when you do, we left it there just so, again, our policy, the look and feel matches what AES and Fayetteville have. But we've added right under the heading, this section superseded by Division Policy PMGS 12-1, and then the text that has been superseded will be grayed out. So if you're going through that document and you see that something's grayed out, you'll know that that has been superseded by the division policy, and you need to go look at the front of the policy and see what our policy is.
Will that be a hot link so then you can go to the division policy?
You know, I don't think we've ever thought about that. Let's see if we can do that. That's a good idea. We never really thought about it. We thought we were doing good to gray it out and put that line there, Sharon. Yeah, that's a good point. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I'm not going through all of them. I just wanted to show you one so you'll know when you come across it what that means.
Looks like this section, meaning that section. Yeah.
It is. This section has been super. This section under meals without an overnight stay.
I guess I'd like to see division policy supersede section below.
Well,
To me, that makes it more.
so instead of this section below, but see, it's also the title above. So, but I do think a link would be good if we can link to the policy there. We can see if we can do that. Okay, and this is just not anything that's an exception in the policy, but it's something that Extension has struggled with. So every opportunity I try to talk about it a little bit, and this is what happens if you go to a meeting or make a phone call or go, to a client's place of business and you're leaving from home instead of leaving from work. The rule is you can claim the lesser of the actual miles that you drove from your home to that meeting, or what the miles would have been had you driven from your office to that meeting. And the same would be true in reverse. Whichever is the least, that's what you can claim. And basically the rule is, you can never claim more than you actually drove. Okay. And this happens all the time. We have folks, and truthfully, it can be a benefit for Extension because you save the time of having to go to the office, go to the meeting, go back to the office. But if you are a supervisor or somebody who reviews travel expense reimbursement requests, please be aware and cautious that somebody is not abusing this, that somebody is not always scheduling, a farm call that's right on their way home kind of thing, 4 days a week. Just be careful with that. We are going to have more training material. Jackie and her team are working on having some Centra sessions at the end of this month to go into the travel a little bit more. But I did want to give y'all kind of a high level of what it looks like and what the major points were. Any questions? You ready for the quiz? Okay.
Meal reimbursements,
Mm-hmm.
actual amount.
Mm-hmm.
If that amount is over the per diem, do they still put that actual amount?
Yes.
Or do they put the full per diem? So,
Put the actual, we will cut it back to what's allowed.
per diem.
Yes, and that's
I
a
see over and over the full per diem.
yeah, that's a good point. And the issue there is that looks bad when auditors look at it. It looks like somebody is just automatically putting the per diem all the time, when state regs say actual not to exceed the per diem. So if you exceed the per diem, go ahead and put the actual amount. And that reminds me of something else. In the scenario we were just talking about where somebody goes to a meeting and they left from home instead of leaving from the office, you're going to get the lesser of. But if the lesser of was from the office and you actually went from home, we would like you on your travel form to put, if you're going to claim the lesser of, but parenthetically maybe on the line below, put actually left from home, but office is shorter, or something, so that there's a record of what you really did versus what you're claiming, if it differs. Because we really need to have good records of what really happened. Because a couple years from now, when an auditor questions it, you're not going to remember, or I wouldn't.
What about actual receipts? Will there be a time when this per diem, because it's pretty good price.
It is.
I'm thinking more so than what a person would normally spend for a meal, especially dinner. Will there come a time when it's like just receipts?
Well,
Or do we get it?
I mean, I can't know what's coming down the pike. Now, some departments now choose to require receipts. If the department head chooses to, they can require receipts of their employees. Across the state in state agencies, even though it's not mandated by DFNA, some agencies choose to require receipts. Where I came from at DHS, our division required receipts. Right now, CES administration is not requiring receipts. You know, who knows? Doesn't hurt to keep them, but they're not required. Anything else? Has everybody signed in? Amy has the sign-in sheet. Okay, for this one, again, if you have policy type questions, myself or Jackie, questions about the actual travel forms or processes, please see Jackie or Renee. Okay? That's it. This will be on Learn in about a week. If you know somebody that missed it, they can review it there. And otherwise, thank you for coming.
We're so glad we were invited. Thank you.
Aren't you?